This video was sponsored by Skillshare. I have a link for you to try them out for free, so make sure to hang out until the end of the video. This tweet kind of took over my feed a few weeks ago. It showed a timeline from searchengineland.com that illustrates how Google has slowly made the distinction between their paid and organic search results smaller and smaller over time. First by changing the full colored background to much smaller tags, then by changing the piercing yellow color to the same green as the links, followed by removing first the fill, then the border, and finally also the color from the tag altogether. And then, in one last move, Google also chose to move this tag to the exact same position where the newly introduced fav icons were put for organic search results, so the two became even harder to distinguish. This tweet sparked outrage from outspoken Google critics to tech publications, and yes, it also caused me, TechAltar, to angrily retweet it as well, all of which then quickly led to Google walking back on its latest design. The outraged discussions that were generated by this tweet of course went far beyond just complaining about ad labeling and highlighted how generally people didn't seem to trust the search giant anymore, whether it was for things like manipulating search results, privacy violations, or squeezing out competitors from adjacent businesses by using their monopolistic grip on the search market as a whole. And while regardless of these concerns, Google's dominance over search has remained uncontested, this latest outcry once again highlighted the desire from some consumers for an alternative. And indeed, alternative search engines that claim to fix many of the things that people dislike about Google do exist, and lately many of them have been growing very quickly. So in the 60-second episode of the Story Behind series, I decided to take a closer look at both the search engines themselves, how they work, as well as the companies behind them. Real quick before we start, if you'd like to see more in-depth analysis of tech companies, especially from a business perspective, consider subscribing to TechAltar. The basic theory behind running a search engine is rather simple, as it only consists of three main steps. Crawling through websites to extract what's important on them, indexing that by putting it into a neatly organized list, and finally, when the user starts a new search, finding the most relevant results from that list. And while the theory is simple, the practice at scale is of course incredibly hard, as the internet is vast, doesn't stop growing, and much of it is simply not neatly categorized. It is so difficult, in fact, that actually only a couple of companies are even left trying. A couple of smaller players like Baidu and Yandex have continued to crawl and index their parts of the internet and managed to stay relevant by having a regional focus. But globally, really only Google and to some extent Bing have been able to keep up with the vastness of the internet. And as their lead grows, building an alternative system of crawlers and indexers that could actually beat their incredibly advanced systems has become almost impossible at this point. So instead, those that wish to compete against them, so smaller companies like Ecosia, Startpage, Qwant, or DuckDuckGo, have found another way. Each has actually allied with Google or Bing as their search partner, who they then buy search results from. Each has then also picked one or multiple ad networks and affiliate programs whose ads they then insert into their results. And because they can't actually beat Google and Bing on quality, each has instead picked a, let's call it a purpose. One defining characteristic that makes them worth using over the big guys, like privacy or tree planting. And here's how that works. Take Startpage from the Netherlands, for example, who gives you both search results and ads from Google, but as they claim, without the tracking. Every search query you send to them first goes through their servers, where they claim to strip away all of your personally identifiable information, like your IP address from it. They then send it off to Google, who returns both the search results and the ads for the query, which Startpage serves back to you together with a few extra tweaks on top that they hope will give them a competitive edge. Features like anonymous view, for example, which lets you open search results through a Startpage proxy server, so your own machine never actually has to touch the websites, which therefore can't track you or put cookies onto your browser. DuckDuckGo and Qwant both have a very similar model as Startpage, as they're both privacy-focused search engines as well, with the main difference being that instead of focusing on a single source like Google, they primarily use a mix of Bing and a bunch of other data sources. Berlin-based Ecosia uses Bing for both search results and ads, which they supplement with affiliate links from the likes of Amazon and eBay. And while they do have a pretty respectable privacy policy of their own, their main focus is of course on planting trees. In fact, Ecosia is a non-profit, a so-called steward-owned company, meaning that not only can their owners not take profits out of the company, they can't even sell their shares at a profit or give them to anyone outside of the company. An impressive amount of commitment to trees, of which the company has recently surpassed planting 80 million pieces. So that's the basic business model of essentially all the alternative search engines that I could find. They essentially buy search results from external companies, they put ads and promotions on top, and they hope that they make more money from the ads than they paid for the results. Which poses a couple of questions. Like, does this business model actually make sense? Does it work? To which the answer is a pretty resounding yes. DuckDuckGo, Ecosia, and Startpage have all confirmed to be profitable for many years. And while I can't find a direct confirmation from Qwant, I'd be surprised if they weren't as well. In fact, last month alone, after paying Bing for their results, Ecosia, for example, had almost 2.5 million euros in income, of which they were able to spend almost 65% either directly on tree planting or on other similar environmental projects. Pretty dope. The fact that these companies don't track you, at least if you believe their privacy policies, means that their ads will, of course, in theory, be less relevant and should therefore make less money than, for example, those of Google would. But search advertising seems wildly profitable even without the tracking, it seems. In fact, well, Ecosia wouldn't actually confirm or deny this in an interview with me, but I actually bet that their users are more likely to click on ads than, say, those of Google, because their users want them to make money, they want them to plant more trees, and so they're more likely to click. Anyway, how about growth? And again, Startpage, DuckDuckGo, and Ecosia have all confirmed to be growing at healthy rates. Startpage's CEO in an interview told me that even though they have essentially done almost no marketing at all so far, they were still able to grow consistently at a healthy, even if not too amazing, 15 to 20% year over year. And looking at Ecosia's monthly earnings, it's clear that they are on a huge growth trajectory as well, more than doubling their income almost every year since 2014. And DuckDuckGo, the largest of the four companies, has actually been growing at an almost exponential rate as well, to the point where they now handle over 40 million queries a day. So growth seems good. Now, to be clear, all four of these companies are still tiny in comparison to Google, and many of them have only really taken off in North America and in Western Europe. French Qwant is strongest by far in France, German Ecosia has most of its users from Germany and the US, and Dutch Startpage is dominated by German users as well. Still, at least in these countries, they are consistently starting to show up in actual market share statistics, even if for now they're typically at the very bottom of them. And given how privacy and environmental issues are only becoming more and more important to people around the world, I would expect their growth to actually accelerate. In fact, Ecosia has confirmed getting huge increases in adoption each time a fire burns down one forest or another somewhere in the world, and Startpage has told me that they too can sometimes double their traffic overnight when a big privacy scandal, like the Snowden revelations for example, hit the public. And as these companies get ever more comfortable with the basic search model, they're also starting to branch out to adjacent services as well. Startpage, for example, has built a side business with StartMail, which claims to be a private and encrypted mailing app that is monetized through a subscription. And I was told that they're also working on a Google Maps competitor as well. Qwant already has a private maps app of their own in beta based on OpenStreetMaps, and Ecosia too is experimenting with side projects like Ecosia Travel, where booking hotels gives Ecosia referral revenue, which they then use for planting more trees. And while I personally think that these side businesses will be much harder to grow than the core search, the companies seem undeterred. Now, as I was doing research for this video, two distinct questions kept bugging me. First, all of these small companies rely almost exclusively on Google and Bing for results. If those big guys were to stop supplying the smaller ones with results, they would almost certainly go out of business. And yet, Google and Bing have essentially created this cottage industry of smaller competitor for themselves. Why? Well, I found that the answer starts with Bing, for whom the incentives are relatively straightforward. Given that its market share on desktop computers is about 5% and on mobile devices it's almost non-existent, these alternatives like Ecosia and DuckDuckGo are primarily taking market share away from Google, not Bing. Microsoft has never really managed to make customers love their search engine, so quietly powering others and building an ad network that spans across all of them just seems to make sense. And once Bing starts doing it, it starts making sense for Google as well, as they'd much rather have users looking for an alternative be served by Google technologies rather than those from Bing. Plus, as a little bonus, by powering the likes of Startpage, Google also gets a little leverage with lawmakers and can avoid being called a monopoly. After all, hey, they not only allow, but actually actively support a competitor, right? Not a monopoly at all. Alright, then my second question was, if Google and Bing are both available to all of these search providers, why would any of them pick Bing? I mean, especially outside of the US and especially outside of English language sites, Bing results are simply clearly inferior. And here I found that the answer mostly seems to lie in negotiation power. None of the Bing companies actually told me why they picked Bing, beyond Ecosia saying that they were not able to come to a satisfactory agreement with Google, but Startpage told me that Google is simply tough to negotiate with. Google gave Startpage a very limiting set of rules, like not allowing their results to be mixed with those from other search providers, and not allowing Startpage to present Google search results in a mobile app in a private way. So Startpage's mobile search app therefore actually had to end up using Bing instead, leading to the pretty awkward situation where their web and mobile app results are actually quite different. I guess Google just doesn't feel like they need to compromise, so they don't give their partners too much wiggle room. And I imagine that Ecosia, DuckDuckGo, Qwant, and the others, they've just decided that it is better for them to have a partner that is a little more flexible, a little more willing to compromise, even if that means slightly worse results. Now, I find search engines absolutely fascinating, obviously, hence this very long video. And I think the best way to learn to understand how they work is to learn about SEO, search engine optimization. Skillshare has two fantastic originals on the topic, where an industry veteran walks you through everything from the SEO basics up until some of the most advanced concepts, with real interactive class projects and all. I've actually found these classes very useful for my own startup, Qwant, and if you are building an app, a website, a YouTube channel, or really anything online that you'd like to drive traffic to, or if you're just generally interested in how search works, then you can now watch both of them for free as long as you're one of the first 500 people to sign up using my link in the description below. If you are, you'll get 2 months of free unlimited access to the thousands of Skillshare classes on anything from graphic design, video editing, web development, and more. And even once those 2 months are up, an annual subscription is just $10 a month. Links are in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.